Okay, today is May 21st, and this is Legislative Review Committee. And I guess if we can, Sarah, will you be able to do an attendance for the minutes by just who's listed
Yes, ma'am. I sure can.
as attending? Okay, that'd be great. And then looking for an approval for last meeting, which was February 27th, for those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous there. Okay, the current topics that we have moved up due to their relevance and recent assignment to the committee are listed. And then the other items that we had been working on that seem less relevant at this time have been moved for future consideration. They're sort of on hold. And I'll let Deborah lead with staff input as we start these two new topics to learn what we have and inquiries from the committee.
Thank you, Commissioner. The first item of discussion for today is review of the ordinance referencing loud or unruly gatherings in residential neighborhoods. And we've asked the attorney's office to be present. And we've also asked the police department to be present, as well as code enforcement and several other departments that can support in this discussion. This is, in fact, the first time we are discussing this topic. We are looking to, staff is looking, commissioners, to get some direction on additional steps you want us to take after today's meeting. But we'll start by just providing some fundamental information. And so at this point, we will start with the attorney's office.
Thank you.
So I'll speak. I'm actually Michael Petty is going to be presenting on this matter. I began coordinating with Commissioner Neesmith regarding this ordinance, and we looked at a model from the City of Los Angeles. His concern was managing loud and unruly parties in a way to hold the owner accountable. And, once we looked at the model, Michael worked with him more particularly in making sure it met the requirements of our state law and our local ordinance, and helped him revise it. So I'll let Michael talk about some of the particulars of what the ordinance does.
Hello, everybody. So I'm not sure. There's a couple of versions of the ordinance going around. So I guess my first question to you is, if somebody could look at their ordinance and tell me under number 1, under it, what does it say? Does it say loud noises of such volume, or does it say any noise in violation of section 3-5-24?
Hold on. That was sent out not with this batch.
Yeah, I didn't get it. So
Let's see. Hold on.
Michael, I'm sending that to you now.
Okay.
What Commissioner Wright sent out, I just sent it to you.
Okay. Well, as you look, I guess I can tell you sort of what the ordinance does, and as Judd said, like this, Commissioner Neesmith was concerned about this. I think in particular there was a property where, an Airbnb or some sort of property like that, where they kept renting it for parties. So this essentially says that prohibits loud and unruly gatherings and defines them as a violation of things that are already violations of our ordinances. So the noise ordinance, or obstruction of the street or public right of way, public intoxication. You'll see all those listed out in there. Those are already violations under our ordinance, but the way our ordinance is written now, you would have to charge the person who's doing it. This ordinance will allow us to hold either the person who's leasing the property at that time or the owner of the property. It provides some ways to provide them notice that there was something going on, and then hold them responsible eventually if it's a continued violation. So that's sort of basically the purpose of it, I think. I'm happy to answer questions about it.
committee members? My question had to do with what was the posting of notice. Thank you. Thanks.
So
On the door of it.
So what the ordinance does is essentially say, as I said before, like our ordinance is now, it's the person who does it. By posting the notice on the door and then providing service via mail or personal service to the owner of the property, gives them some notice that this is going on at that property, so that then we can ultimately potentially hold them responsible for the behavior that's going on their property too, even if they aren't the ones who are doing it. They're allowing it to occur, but they need to have notice of that first.
So that's where posting it on the door is sort of a legal way of informing. And then why does it have to stay for 30 days?
I'm not sure that it has to. That was based on Los Angeles. What we want to do is make sure that there's no argument that they weren't aware that this was going on. So I think this is just multiple ways for us to try to and make sure that there was knowledge about the behavior that was going on before we held somebody responsible.
And I can speak to that from a policy perspective. I think this ordinance also was, like Michael mentioned, to target Airbnbs. I think it's because you may have people coming and going and making sure they have noticed that that this particular residence has had this issue in the past. Is one thing I think.
Committee members, what are you thinking, and what more information do we want about this?
I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question. And it's just to clarify, I'm looking at the copy of the ordinance that you sent out, Allison. Is that the correct one?
I think so. That was in my LRC folder from October. So
okay.
That's all I have to go with.
So in section 4-5-2, it says that the officers may require persons to leave the residence or issue a citation and or arrest any person committing a violation of provisions of Athens-Clarke County Code. So is that to say that, I mean, like, would this then apply only in instances where these are offenses that are otherwise arrestable offenses? Or are we saying that for loud and unruly gatherings, generally, they have the license to arrest folks for any of these other violations, such as litter or things that we would normally bring people in for?
Commissioner Parker, I can answer that. I think that's one of the changes I personally made from the Los Angeles ordinance, and it references that section 1-1-5, which is what you guys modified a year ago to limit the type of ordinance violations that people can be arrested on. So that specifically takes that into account. So you would only be able to be arrested if it was something you would have normally
been arrested for.
Right.
Okay.
So I was trying to incorporate what you guys did last year into this.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. The other thing I would add is I'm looking, Judd did send me the one that you guys are looking at. One thing that I would recommend changing on that is under 1, you'll see that it says loud noise of such volume that a distance of 50 feet from the structure. If you all see that. I would change that to say any noise in violation of section 3-5-24 of this code. So in other words, we just incorporate our already
existing language.
Our existing language for noise violations, so that we're consistent.
Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
May I just for a moment? I just wanted to let the others on the call know that I forwarded that document to them so that they can review along with us.
Okay, thank you. Does that include, Michael? I really liked the audible in the interior of an adjoining resident, because I know that some people try to get away from this and then they go to their house thinking, I'll go in my house and not be bothered by the party next door. Is that detail included in the update you just recommended?
No, because it's going to track with our current noise ordinance, which has the either 100 feet or 300 feet, depending on the time of day.
Okay. And so that was just left over from the original
Los Angeles.
communities. Los Angeles. Okay.
That language was left over from the original ordinance, and it would be inconsistent with our current ordinance. I would think you would want it to look like what we have right now.
No, I agree. That would lessen the confusion.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is Ovita. Is Chief Sproul still on?
Yes.
Yes,
Chief, I know I've come to you about several issues in as far as noise in that North Athens area, and the housing and the way they're spaced, it might be a little different. Does this do the changes we are looking at? And if you don't know right now, it'll be fine, because I know I'm kind of catching you off guard. Would that have any kind of impact on the complaints and concerns that I have brought to you about that North Athens area?
I would have to have an opportunity to read the document that was just sent to us and understand a little bit more what the parameters are. So I can't give you a straight answer to that right now. What I would like to add in reference to the comment earlier about the police arresting people. I think one issue that's there is that when we go, if a person, we can cite the person, and then when we leave, if they turn it back up, we can come and cite them again, and we leave if they turn it back up. We're in that whole cycle where if at some point it says the idea is the ordinance would allow us to arrest if the behavior continues and they don't discontinue the unlawful behavior. So I'm not sure. I need to look at the ordinance a little bit closer, but this issue of arrest actually would give us more authority to make something happen. So, after the police have come to a residence 3 times and told them to turn the noise down or, discontinue the unlawful act, we should be at a point where we can actually arrest someone if they continue to disobey the law.
I'm sorry, I didn't, I need to read it a little bit more. Chief Sproul, help me again. How are you feeling comfortable with the way you've been able to enforce the original ordinance as far as being effective? And is arrest the only alternative?
So let me. I'm going to have Deputy Chief Salters weigh in. He's been staying a little closer to the issue, and I had him in on the call today to deal with this. So, Chief Salters, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I would say that I think the Noise Ordinance 3-5-24 has been effective. We have been citing, and our officers are very clear on the expectations of quality of life issues within Athens-Clarke County. So we are being effective in writing citations and making sure that we address these reoccurring issues specifically in the north side of town.
So these changes,
Thank you.
Ms. Thornton, I don't think that these changes are going to change the situation on the north side. This is really just to say we're trying to be able to hold the owners or the lessees responsible for addressing the problems there. But the rules as far as when we can or can't charge somebody for violation of the noise ordinance are still not going to change.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wright, code enforcement, building inspections and code enforcement staff are also on the call.
Okay, I'm ready for their committee's ready for their input. Let's learn. Doug, you want to unmute?
All right, sorry about that.
That's all right.
We typically don't have a role for quote unruly gatherings where people are being loud and violating other kind of ordinances. That's not, I don't think, a code enforcement role. We could assist though with responding to post notices and that kind of thing. And we have dealt with some noise ordinances. The ones we typically deal with are noises that happen from an industrial area or something like that on the neighborhoods. But if it's a party, I just feel like that's probably, we're not post certified. I don't know how much this is going to involve code enforcement, honestly.
And Commissioner, I asked Doug to be present for both of these topics, but I know often when we've discussed enforcement, we tend to shy away from the police being the very first line of enforcement. And I know that Doug's staff is experienced in that arena, but ultimately it would require a lot more input so that we can be better informed from the police department standpoint. I also recall that you asked for us to identify what have been the primary obstacles in enforcing or in enforcement in this area.
Yes. And so does this capture what staff, the issues that we're dealing with where neighborhoods are totally disturbed by short-term rental or just, I think also there's some stereotyping of college students or other rentals. Does this have, I haven't seen what the consequences are for the citation. Who has that information?
I can give you that information, Commissioner.
Okay.
I set it up specifically to be like this. Typically, all of our ordinance violations are punished. I say all of them. The vast majority of our ordinance violations are punished by up to 6 months in the county jail or probation and up to $1,000 fine. So that would be the maximum. And so I just set it as we use all the other ordinance violations.
And that includes the property owner.
Yeah. For each violation. So
in the, I think if I could just chime in one more time. So in the case that we all know about on the east side, the Airbnb home, I don't know that the police were really called out there because it wasn't like a party, it was just bad behavior. And in that case, I think code enforcement could play a role in notifying the property owner. We do deal with a lot of property owners, rental properties, and so this would give us a tool to hold the property owner responsible like the chief said, instead of just the person inside.
Okay, other committee members?
I got, I guess I just, of course, my district is a little bit different from everybody. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to look at the document that was just sent to us, but my issues are a little bit different going on out to that far north because I have to deal, and it may be there, so please give me. I deal with the loud noises and the parties like every other district, but my question, but I also deal with gun shooting, and I think it's legal. I do think it's legal. And I don't think we've ever talked about guns, target practice in some of those areas that in one of my constituents, the bullet went in her daughter's bedroom. And so it was the noise, but it is also a safety issue. And I don't know if we've ever talked about it, but I do want to put it on somebody's radar. That is an issue in North Athens.
I would only add, Commissioner Thornton, that those, and Chief Sproul may be able to speak to you better than that. There are some more serious state crime charges that I would think somebody that can be charged with reckless conduct and firearm issues that the police can deal with that on.
Yeah, there are charges, discharging a firearm. There's all kind of charges that we can place. if they're in violation. A lot of the times, though, there is no violation. It's just sound of gunshots. And in some cases, it is in Clarke County. And in other cases, they're right on the borderline there. And the shots are not even being fired in Athens. I would ask that they just continue to call the police on those kind of calls. And when we see a clear violation, there are charges available that we can charge them with. We're not going to be able to stop people from firing guns altogether, because in many instances they are in compliance with the law, but we'll handle it on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks again.
Russell, what are you thinking?
Mute, Russell.
Russell, can you unmute?
I'm looking at the firearm ordinance right now, section 3-5-5. It shall be unlawful to fire any firearm within 600 feet of any structure reasonably capable of habitation or occupation. It shall be unlawful to fire a rifle within 900 feet of any structure reasonably capable of habitation. So we do have some firearm ordinances here locally that would carry those. Looks like they would maybe carry those same penalties of the $1,000 fine, 6 months in jail. But back to the unruly gathering, it looks good to me.
I agree.
All right. Well, what's the will of the committee to do now at this point?
I move to approve this ordinance out of committee and move it on for consideration of the full mayor and commission.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody any nays? Okay. Michael?
Commissioner, yeah, can I clarify just, is that with the change that I suggested?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Staff, is there any more input that staff was for us at this point?
I do have a question, Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Considering that Chief Spruill hadn't had an opportunity to review this proposed ordinance with the revision, I will start to prepare the document to send this before the full commission. But should he have any input, can I forward that to you before submitting that document?
I would appreciate that if Chief Spruill would give it his attention and update us. I think if the committee needs to meet, we could just drop a quick meeting to address his, or we could do it by email if that's appropriate, so that we're all in the loop on those updates. But we don't want to miss anything. So that sounds good to me. What does the committee think?
I'm sorry, you kind of broke up that last part about when the updates from Chief Spruill were going to be.
I said that depending on how much feedback or updates he may bring forward, we could either meet quickly to address those, or we could do it by email. And I wanted to know what the committee thought.
Okay. Has the chief not seen the ordinance we're talking about?
Evidently not.
Not the revision or not the proposal from Attorney Petty, Commissioner Edwards, and I did not forward that to Chief until we'd already begun the call. So I'm not saying he's unfamiliar with it. I'm just saying I've not provided him an opportunity to at least review what we were discussing this morning, this afternoon.
Mr. Petty, refresh my recollection on that amendment.
Yes, Commissioner. It's pretty simple. The original one that you saw there had some language from Los Angeles that said loud noises are prohibited. I just, instead of putting loud noises, I want to say any noise in violation of our current noise ordinance.
Yeah, so loud noises as defined currently in our Muni Code.
Right. It's just bringing it in line with our current noise ordinance.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I think the chief's input could be weighed at the full mayor and commission. I mean, I think that's a very minor amendment in the grand scheme of things. We're just defining what the noises mean within our own jurisdiction to be consistent in our own Unicode.
Okay, so we'll move this ahead as we just voted, and then we'll get feedback from Chief Spruill, and we'll make sure that that gets, as we say, folded into it once it's at the agenda setting.
Well, and I know the chief expressed some concern about, being able to arrest folks. He's still going to be able to do that under our existing noise ordinance. He could arrest the people conducting the party. But this new ordinance that we're talking about here provides some punishments for the owners. And if the owners, and there's creates penalties where the owners could be arrested themselves too. So we have the existing punishments in the current noise ordinance where party goers could be arrested if they don't comply. But this new ordinance provides some penalties for the owners where they too could be arrested if there is a history of noncompliance. According to the discretion of the judge, right, Michael, Mr. Petty, municipal court judge?
Well, so they could be sentenced to jail based on the discretion of the judge.
Okay.
You guys passed last year an amendment to 115 that really limits the situations in which somebody can be arrested on an ordinance violation. So these would be subject to that, essentially, to those limitations. I'm trying to pull those up right now, but I can go over those if you'd like to, if you want me to find them.
Well, there's not a proposal on the table to amend any of that currently. That's just has broad application across the entire government. So,
right.
All right, and then we have 11 different topics, including the noise ordinance, that are grounds for this citation as well. All right, so does Deborah, is this something that we would be able to jump to the June 2 meeting? Since this is a...
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, since this is a commissioner committee.
You're correct. Yes, I was thinking of today's date. It's just a matter of me drafting the document and then getting it to Clerk Spratling.
And we have an extra week next week. Does that help? Does that sound feasible?
Yes, ma'am.
See us on the June 2? Okay. All right. Anything else on this topic, committee? Okay. All right. Second ordinance, the second topic is was assigned to us in March, and this is our first meeting since it was assigned. So Deborah, I'll let you get started with that.
So that second topic is examining opportunities for local civil rights legislation modeled on the recent Brookhaven ordinance and utilizing the municipal court and ACC attorney's office as support for the prospective ordinance. And here I have asked Judge Ryan Hope to join us in the conversation, and I've also asked the attorney's office, and my understanding is that Attorney Drake has appointed Sherry, or appointed this particular topic to Sherry Hines. And I've also asked the police to be present and code enforcement, just because I'm not certain how broadly the commission desires to expand the scope. I do want to note very specifically that Judge Hope is limited in his role and participation here. So he's not going to be able to tell us what to do. As a matter of fact, many of these cases will end up before him as the administrative officer for the county. And so his role here is very limited. And in case he should be asked a question, I'm sure he'll let us know whether it's appropriate or not. But I do want to give everyone a heads up. But I would like, if Judd thinks it's appropriate, to start with Sherry, unless Judd wants to present some additional information first. And before we go there, Commissioner Wright, may we excuse those who are not participating in this topic?
Please.
Especially Brad.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds good to me.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I'm sorry. I do think it's appropriate for Sherry to handle this matter. I'll be listening and ready to assist as needed.
Certainly. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. As you all know, I did prepare a confidential memo, and I'm sorry that I did not get it to you all sooner. I would just say that to the extent that you want to discuss the topic today, it would be ideal if we could allow the memo to remain confidential, just because it does contain some pieces of legal advice that would be relevant to any action that you may or may not want to take. I do want to say that, we have spoken with Commissioner Denson, who provided us with a number of materials. We've reviewed a number of ordinances, including Brookhaven's and Decatur's. I'm happy to answer questions and discuss those ordinances. They're very similar, but they have some differences. And one thing I do want to address is that I've heard concerns that essentially the local government needs to take steps because discrimination is happening, and we can't allow that discrimination to happen. And I do want to point out to the LRC, because obviously we're very sympathetic to that, and we certainly don't want to encourage or in any way support discrimination for any basis. But I do think it's important to note that there are other venues where people can seek redress for discriminatory actions. So in the context of employment discrimination, there's the EEOC, whose sole existence, and they're quite good at it, is investigating allegations of discrimination. Or HUD, for instance, takes complaints of discrimination with regards to housing, including things related to LGBTQ discrimination. So it's not just your standard race, gender, and age. So I just want to point out that there are other options that are available beyond local investigations. And I don't know what else you'd like to ask me today, Alex. I know confidential memorandum. I know Judge Hope, if you want to say anything about the ordinance.
Just that, as Deborah already said, and you and I, Sherry, talked about this as well, I can't talk about the substance, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, because I would have to possibly rule on whether or not someone had violated this if it were to come into action. I'm mainly here to talk about what process would look like or things along those lines, whether or not our court can handle a matter like this, which we can. The way I think it's been written in the other jurisdictions, it seems to be an administrative hearing matter, and we don't have very many of those. It would be not a problem to handle an input if it were that.
And I do think it's important to note, if you haven't had a chance to review the Brookhaven or Decatur ordinances, is that one of the things about these ordinances is Decatur specifically places a substantial burden on a municipal court judge that, before one of these cases can move forward, there has to be a preliminary hearing that requires the municipal court judge to make an affirmative finding of fact as to whether there's probable cause to move forward, and particularly whether the ordinance is preempted by state or federal law as applied in that particular context. So there's some differences between these two ordinances.
I had a question regarding that. If it were found that a case brought before the municipal court was somehow preempted by state or federal law, would the complainant and other parties identified in that case still be able to go through with the voluntary mediation, or would the dismissal of that case kind of prevent that action from being taken? And this is based on my readings of the Decatur and Brookhaven ordinances.
Sure. I think my opinion would be that it would prevent any of that, because we would have no grounds to engage in any of that, because we'd have no authority. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't proceed with voluntary mediation through the EEOC, for instance, which is something that they do from time to time. I'm not as familiar with HUD's procedure, but I would not feel comfortable moving forward.
Would we be able to somehow provide complainants with support in accessing help from the EEOC or HUD if they filed a complaint, but we weren't able to take any action on it in terms of municipal court?
I mean, I think the easy answer is that both of those organizations have online applications for filing complaints that are very easy, that could be added to our website. Okay. So it'd be very easy to direct anyone to those resources if they felt that they've been discriminated against, regardless of what we do in terms of an ordinance.
Is that something we already do with our current, well, I guess we wouldn't, under the current ordinance, I guess there wouldn't really be grounds for that. But I mean, it could be done very easily, as much as just adding those resources to our website. I'd definitely like us to consider pursuing that.
Right. I'm just searching real quick, but I don't think that's on line anywhere.
So Mariah, you want to capture that as something that would come forward at our next meeting, and so we could see what that would look like and what steps we have to take?
Okay, yeah. I motion that we, which part of both questions of mine, or just the latter part about having those resources displayed on our website? The
part that it sounds like we could go straight ahead and do. We would learn what she just outlined, as well as how that link looked and where it would be appropriate. That second part.
Yeah. So I motion that we investigate adding the EEOC and HUD discrimination complaint forms to our website, and continue considering that at our next meeting.
I second it.
All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, so we'll capture that, see what that looks like, and learn. Deborah, does that make sense? And then we would learn how that would be, like what would be the appropriate place or places in our website for that?
Yes, ma'am. I can tell you that these are posted for sure. HUD's is posted on HCD's website. I can't recall if EEOC is, but Commissioner Parker, are you wanting this posted on the primary ACC Gov website?
Yeah, like I would love to see, like, if you have a complaint about discrimination, you can go to this page and there's like links for housing, links for employment, something like that, where if someone might not know, they know they've had an issue but aren't sure, they don't know what HCD is, or they aren't familiar with HUD, they can kind of go to an easy resource to sort out who needs to hear their complaint.
And Deborah, I don't know if it's going on right now, but they have the volunteer attorney in the law library once a week. It's volunteer, but it is something that the county government supports.
That could be another resource that we would advertise
and can make referrals. So that might be another area to highlight in those same spots.
So adding EEOC, HUD, and other resources, or at least links for those additional resources, and make them more easily accessible on an ACC Gov's home webpage.
Madam Chair and committee, I was looking through both of the ordinances, and I looked back at the sample, I think that Sherry sent us about the, I guess it was an Atlanta case. But anyway, and some of that I was looking at, they actually break down like gender, they kind of list all the areas that, or some of the areas that might be discriminatory. Can we ask the attorney to look into adding people who may have a criminal background as one of those areas that folk may have been or could be discriminated against? I don't know if that's possible, but when I looked at the, and I'm sorry, I just don't remember which one I read, and one of them, they actually list different areas. And I would like for some background check, and if adding some people with criminal backgrounds, I would appreciate it.
Anyone else have something?
No, go ahead.
Start talking yet? Okay, thanks. I saw the example in Attorney Berryman's memo regarding the country club and what happened with that particular case when someone had filed a discrimination complaint. I would love to see other examples of what has happened in these municipalities when folks have brought discrimination complaints forward. I know in Attorney Berryman's memo, at the time, he said that the Human Rights Council in Atlanta, I believe, had been somewhat inactive. So perhaps that's why we didn't have a lot of examples. But I would love to take a look at more cases to see, you know, what this actually looks like in practice when people bring complaints forward through the mechanisms outlined in those two ordinances presented.
And I can speak to that. I think the reality is it doesn't exist yet.
Okay.
The Brookhaven ordinance was just passed earlier this year.
Okay.
So there certainly are no cases on that, at least no decision. I also understand, and certainly Attorney Drake can speak more to this, but in talking to attorneys who've been responsible for drafting these, my understanding is that they're getting very few, like maybe 2 complaints related to these. And I think that honestly is consistent with what we've experienced with our discrimination ordinance for downtown with the dress code. You know, we've only had, I think, 3 maybe since we adopted that. So I think there just aren't a lot of complaints that are being made for whatever reason that may be. And then most of these ordinances are only a few years old, so we don't have any litigation to give us case law guidance on how this will play out.
Okay.
So Sherry, thank you for that comment. And so I guess it was kind of quiet after my question about folk with criminal is that a possibility, or is that okay, or no? It just seemed like that kind of dropped with a dead response.
So I made a note of it, and I was going to research it and get back to you.
Oh, okay. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I'm good. I just didn't, nobody responded. I just wanted to make sure it's there. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Does the committee think it'd be appropriate for the next meeting when we get the information coming forward? It sounds to me like, or I believe that maybe one of the reasons for the few complaints, because we know that it's not a few incidences, it's just a few complaints, that we also improved on our website or look at ways we can improve accessibility to that complaint avenue. Is that something that we also, as a committee, want to look at that? I think that we can improve the complaint process, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so how would that come forward from staff, Deborah? What kind of input do you think staff can provide us, or do we want to just brainstorm next meeting?
Allow me, Commissioner, to clarify and make sure I understand what you're asking. So specific to the dress code, the ordinance that addresses discrimination concerning dress code downtown, you're looking for ways to improve accessibility to filing complaints, specific in that matter. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I was thinking our code, what we've done already, which is tied to alcohol license, the private party detail, as well as the dress code. While we're looking to help share information that was listed in the last motion, it seems that we could improve the community's awareness of the ordinance we have and how to do the steps to report.
Okay. I can sit with the attorney's office and probably just try to determine which departments are most directly involved, or departments that would be engaged in this the most, and what our current process is and how that looks, how they address it, and how the complaints that they have received came to their attention. And I think if we compile that information, however little or however much it may be, we can contact those departments and then get some additional information to present to you. And if we get that in writing before the meeting, we can share it with the committee, and maybe that will garner additional ideas, or the committee would have questions that they want us to then answer before the next meeting.
Deborah, this is Chief Spruill. We would be glad to work with you all and be involved in that endeavor, particularly because oftentimes people don't know what the reporting process is or who investigates that, and we'll be called, and there's an expectation that we're going to somehow do an investigation and make a determination. And so, you know, since we're a point where people often will go to anyway, I think we should be involved in that effort. So you'd like, I can put some staff with whoever you'd like, and we can help work on that.
Thank you, Chief. I've written this down. Commissioner Wright and other commissioners, is that in line with what you were contemplating?
That sounds good for me.
Sounds good for me too. And then we can discuss that and learn from that on our next meeting. What other questions, committee? Russell?
Well, I would like to get any sort of information about how these ordinances are enforced in other jurisdictions as well. Now, I know that the Decatur, when was the Decatur anti-discrimination ordinance enacted?
I'm not seeing a date on this.
Is Sherry, Ms. Hines, still on the call?
I am looking. It says 19. Their ordinance is it was 2019. Excuse me. I don't know when in 2019. I think it was later, but I will look real quick.
And all indications are there's been no enforcement of that ordinance yet?
My understanding, and I didn't speak to the attorney with Decatur, but my understanding is that both in Brookhaven and Decatur situation, they've had less than 5 complaints. That's my understanding, is like 2 around there that they've dealt with.
Okay, well, I would appreciate if that information could be easily captured and delivered to us.
I wouldn't mind hearing about those 2 cases.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about those 2. And I know Atlanta has had an anti-discrimination ordinance for much longer.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of enforcement, what sort of cases, how many cases have been filed in Atlanta? Are we aware of?
We can try to reach out. I mean, their ordinance has been active since, I think, 2001. And also, I verified Decatur's only passed in November of this year.
Okay.
They also haven't, November of 2019. So they haven't had a long time with it either yet. Okay. There's no like publicly available information, not that we couldn't file open records requests and speak to folks, but it's not, does not appear to be readily available like online or anything like that. But we'll try to track something down.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's certainly the key in this discussion for me is I support the language in this ordinance. I understand the issues of state and federal preemption. So I'd like to see how these 3 similar ordinances statewide have been enforced, and if any challenges have been raised in their enforcement. What sort of matters have been addressed in claims brought under these anti-discrimination ordinances, how those matters have been disposed of, and whether any challenges have been raised seeking to strike down those existing ordinances. I saw something, where we're concerned about preemption with defining a family unit and how the state constitution defines a family unit. And I had a question whether it doesn't matter now how the state defines it. That matter has been adjudicated and decided on by the U.S. Supreme Court. So wouldn't the Supreme Court, they would preempt the state definition. So even if the state defined it as a man and a woman, that definition is preempted by the U.S. Supreme Court. So we could follow their guidance. We follow the preemptive doctrine of the Supreme Court, which of course allows for marriage equality,
Right. And that is correct. And in the case that I cited in the memo that you're referencing, that was actually a separate issue. And that case is a little complicated because there were 3 different parts of the ordinance that were being challenged, one of which was related to the extension of benefits, employee benefits to like insurance to domestic partners. So they were trying to address the issue of spouses, what we would consider spouses now, obviously, but who weren't legally considered spouses at the time. And so that was struck down. Obviously, Obergefell has overruled that, but that was a separate issue from the rest of the part of the case about managing private or civil relationships, I guess.
Okay.
Related, but separate.
Okay. Yeah, I did reach out to Commissioner Denson and hope that these committee members and the Mayor Commission as a whole could it would help move this thing forward if we could have some testimonials and some narratives from aggrieved citizens who feel they've been discriminated against. Of course, their confidentiality and anonymity can be protected, but some specific examples of discrimination. I certainly can imagine housing discrimination and employment discrimination occurring in our community. But if we could have some testimonials, some sort of narrative, some sharing of information from the citizenry so that we could tailor this policy, I think that could really provide some compelling encouragement to this committee and the body as a whole to get this ordinance passed. So that's it. Thank you. I look forward to that information about the enforcement. I understand the issues where we certainly have a stronger foundation to act when it comes to discrimination that might have occurred on property that we own or within institutions that this body governs. We certainly have firmer standing there. But indications are there's a need for an ordinance that touches on private contractual relationships as well, such as landlord-tenant or private employment decisions as well. So thanks for all your help on this, Ms. Hines. I enjoyed reading your memo to help sort of clarify my thinking on this issue.
Sure.
Anybody else? We have several things, I think, to come forward for the next meeting. And I think that now that we're underway, we can also be learning some of those examples as well. So if there's input from the committee for the next packet, we can work with that as well.
I'm good, Allison. I'm good. I'm ready to move to the next level.
Okay. And I was wondering, just in reflection of the memos that we have, the one from Attorney Behrman from 2016 at the bottom of it, it was a very, there was a lot of information at that time, and at the bottom of that memo, it said authorized for public release. Is there a version of our current memo that we've been discussing that's client attorney? Is there a version of that that could have be authorized for public release in helping us capture some of the details that we're weighing out?
We do not currently have one that's authorized for public release. I anticipate that it would be very difficult to draft one that would encompass the material but also be releasable. So we could try.
I think that would be great too. I think there's a lot of aspects of some of the opinions put forth in it that I would like to be able to respond to and discussing, what I think about going forward with an ordinance that is somewhat hindered by not being able to reference it directly.
And and so if there could be, and it might be I'm not even sure how it is, but I think Russell touched on a little bit of it, how he was just processing it. And if those of us that don't have that legal background can learn, even if it's short, but if you could have something that is authorized for public release on this, that when you get to it, and it would be before the next meeting, that would help me and Mariah, and I guess and others as well.
Certainly, I'll work on that.
Okay, appreciate it. Anything else, committee?
I'd like to say in closing that, like, I really hope that we can get this done and find some synthesis of some of the ordinances that have been brought forward that we can pass here, because I think it's just really, really important. So I'm glad we're taking some preliminary steps with clarifying what other resources are available to folks as a part of our website and doing further research. But I hope all this, leads up to us passing something that will show people that we're here for them.
I agree. So is everybody good? It looks like next Thursday, June 18th. We've got everybody in the committees here. Maybe this remote thing is working better for us to get everybody participating, but it's 1:00 on Thursday, June 18th. Gonna have any
Fine with me. Fine with me.
Sounds good to me.
Good.
Funny how wide open our schedules are. I had all kinds of travel that's not happening, so that's going to help too. Okay, looking forward to the updates. Deborah, is there anything else from the committee?
Commissioner Wright and committee, if you could give us a little bit of instruction or guidance on what you would like on that June 18th agenda in addition to the continuation of this topic, or do you want just this topic?
I think just this one if we could focus on this. Committee, what do you think?
I'd like to, I don't want to leave the lead on the back burner for too long. The building ordinance for public buildings, now that we're marching towards SPLOST construction plans. Be nice to have just a check-in perhaps on the lead certification update.
Would if we pencil that, can we make that a headliner for July? Will that suit you so that we can give the full hour to this topic?
Yeah, that's fine with me. Yeah.
And then one of the other new in February, we were assigned special events, and since we're not having Twilight or any of those or AthFest and that sort of thing, I think that one can also stay on the back burner. Does anybody else see anything on the other list? Okay, so we'll stay on this topic, Deborah, and Russell. Thanks for keeping that, and we'll make sure we don't let that one fall back past July. Does that suit everybody? Okay.
That sounds good to me.
All right, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, 1 minute to spare.
Aye
Thanks,
from me.
everybody. Thanks for all your hard work, Sherry.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.